Day. Police used tear gas and rubber bullets to batter back demonstrators. Hundreds were arrested and at least 2 people were killed. This is a government in the final phase of how these regimes behave, one opposition leader said. It is becoming a 21st century dictatorship. Protesters are outraged at the leadership of President Nicolás Maduro. Maduro recently tried to use the Supreme Court to limit the power of the legislature, and the socialist country has been slammed by a devastating economic crisis, resulting in food shortages and increased crime. Yesterday, the U.S. denounced the violence by government forces.
We are concerned that the government of Maduro is violating its own constitution and is not allowing the opposition to have their voices heard.
President Maduro held his own counter-rally on Wednesday, telling a sea of red-dressed supporters the protests are an attempted coup, and also threatening the opposition leader.
Heightened concern on the Korean Peninsula. Ambiguous activity near a known DPRK nuclear test site. Tuesday is the 85th anniversary of the Korean People's Army, the type of occasion when Pyongyang has been known to launch missiles or even test nuclear weapons. Another concern, the continuing military buildup in almost every direction. To the north, China's military is conducting training drills on the border. Also to the north, reports that Moscow is moving troops and equipment closer to the DPRK border. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met his Russian counterpart to discuss the situation. The Kremlin says social media footage of troop movements in Russia's far eastern military district are part of scheduled maneuvers. To the south, Seoul and Washington continue annual military exercises that infuriate Pyongyang and have in the past provoked threats and missile tests.
Lots of strategic assets are also deployed to the Korean Peninsula because of the ROK U.S. military drills.
As a precaution, the U.S. Air Force has sent extra assets to the region, including a plane that can detect debris from a nuclear blast. The U.S. Navy also says the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group is now on its way to the Korean Peninsula. The group's commander posted on Facebook that his ship's deployment was extended to, quote, provide a persistent presence in the Korean waters. After describing the DPRK as a menace for Beijing, U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted Friday, quote, China is very much the economic lifeline to North Korea. So while nothing is easy, if they want to solve the North Korean problem, they will.
The U.S. has blacklisted over 270 employees of a Syrian government agency, accusing them of developing chemical weapons. U.S. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin said those sanctioned are from Syria's Scientific Studies and Research Center. According to the Treasury Department, some of the blacklisted had worked on Syria's chemical weapons program for over 5 years. The sanction orders U.S. banks to freeze the assets of any employees named and bans American companies from conducting business with them. The orders came weeks after a poison gas attack killed scores in the rebel-held province in Syria.
Afghanistan, where as many as 140 soldiers have been killed in a Taliban attack in the northern city of Mazar-i-Sharif. Officials say 10 militants dressed in army uniforms drove military vehicles onto the local army base, where they opened fire on soldiers eating dinner. The NATO-led military coalition has deployed advisors to the base to assist and train Afghan forces. The coalition officials said no international troops were hurt in the attack.
U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis arrived in Kabul today as the country descended further into chaos. Worsening the situation, new allegations the Russians are supplying the Taliban with weapons.
We are going to have to confront Russia, where what they're doing is contrary to international law.
His top general, John Nicholson, made it more clear.
Should it be clear you're not refuting that they're sending weapons to the Taliban?
Oh, no, I'm not refuting that.
The visit comes after a sneak attack by the Taliban on an Afghan military base in Mazar-i-Sharif that killed at least 140 Afghan soldiers. Military vehicles drove Taliban fighters dressed in Afghan army uniforms past checkpoints and into the base. Survivors said the militants then opened fire on unarmed Afghan soldiers returning from a mosque. Mattis called the attack barbaric. The Taliban also claimed responsibility for another attack today at Camp Chapman, a base that houses CIA and U.S. Special Operations Forces. In 2009, 7 CIA officers were killed here in a suicide bomb attack. There are no American casualties this time. The Taliban now control about 40% of the country. The U.S. sent 300 Marines to Helmand Province this month, and General Nicholson said he may need a few thousand more troops. Despite a resurgent Taliban, the U.S. military targeted ISIS militants 2 weeks ago, dropping a 22,000-pound bomb on a network of caves and tunnels near the border with Pakistan. There's been no confirmation of ISIS deaths.
Russia's National Anti-Terror Committee says security forces have killed 2 armed militants in southern Russia who were trained by Islamic State. It says the 2 were planning a series of terrorist crimes. One of the gunmen has been identified as the leader of the terrorist group and the other as an active member. Russia has been on heightened alert after a suicide bomber killed 16 people at the St. Petersburg metro earlier this month. And on Friday, Russia's Federal Security Service said a gunman burst into one of its regional offices in the far east of the country. He opened fire, killing one of its employees and a visitor.
The Turkish military has bombed Kurdish militants in Iraq's Sinjar region and in northeastern Syria.
Last night, Turkey's attack on U.S.-backed Kurdish forces happened about 8:30 p.m. East Coast time. And while Turkey did give 1 hour's advance notice to the United States and to Russia, it made no attempt to seek approval for the raid from its NATO allies, nor to coordinate the attacks with coalition partners. So there was no time for the U.S. to alert its Kurdish allies. At least 30 were killed and 20 wounded in the attack by 24 Turkish warplanes, which struck at 3 different targets in northern Syria and Iraq. The closest U.S. troops were 6 miles away. Turkey's attack prompted a swift condemnation from here at the Pentagon, where one official characterized it as very serious. And in a written statement today, the Pentagon noted, quote, "These airstrikes were not approved by the counter-ISIS coalition and led to the unfortunate loss of life of our partner forces in the fight against ISIS, including the Kurdish Peshmerga." The State Department also conveyed its anger to the government of Turkish President Erdogan.
The point we made to Turkey, and I'm making now, is that Turkey cannot pursue that fight at the expense of our common fight against the terrorists that threaten us all.
Here in the U.S., more than 100 wildfires continue to burn across Florida. The governor declared a state of emergency almost 2 weeks ago.
For 2 days, flames raged across Florida's Collier County, forcing thousands of residents, including Jack Burson, to pack up and head for safety.
This is my farm, my family farm, that's burning down as we speak.
Rain is bringing some relief to Florida's army of firefighters. Even the National Guard is pitching in.
Take this time, make sure your home is safe. This won't be the last fire of the fire season.
Firefighters eventually got this fire under control, allowing people to go home.
Our whole street, Kearney Avenue, just engulfed as a tunnel of flame.
Anthony Alston's backyard was completely torched.
4 boats and about 9 vehicles, but the house was still there. All of our animals were safe and we were safe.
Smoke is still a danger.
I know it's very toxic, and then it's kind of hard for me to breathe.
125 fires are blazing across nearly 85,000 acres of Florida. Firefighters have contained another massive fire in Polk County.
It's amazing what they can do.
So far, no homes or lives have been lost there. Polk County officials think the cause was arson, and they had a warning for whoever's responsible.
Don't sleep, don't relax, because we are on you, and it'll be hotter than this fire until you're locked up in jail.
In Lee County, authorities say a cigarette sparked a 400-acre blaze. Local authorities say the wildfires are the worst they've seen in years and follow one of Florida's driest winters.
Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres has called for massive aid investment to avert famine in Yemen. He said that a child dies in the country every 10 minutes from hunger and disease. A UN appeal to raise over $2 billion is being only 15% covered, but the UN Food Agency said they need to scale up rations to deliveries to 9 million people deemed severely food insecure. A conflict between Houthi rebels and the Saudi-led coalition has seen more than 10,000 people killed. Guterres has renewed